This second video made immediately after I just made the other one. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see there's two similarly titled videos. So the day after I had the conversation with the woman of the first video, I saw a guy I hadn't seen since I was in the ministry. He and I had a long friendship, got along great. He's a wonderful guy and proved himself that once again as we got reacquainted. But when I went up to him, he saw me and he made a big smile, so I smiled. And then we greeted each other. I don't remember. I said something like, we haven't seen each other since my little interval in my life, or some silly way of referring to my having been transgender. And he laughed and referred to it as my midlife crisis. My midlife crisis. To the best of my memory, that's the first time anyone to me referred to what I went through being transgender as a midlife crisis. I thought a lot about that and talked with Julie about it. I wrote about it in my memoir in the sense that I asked myself so many questions. Why did I crash in 2013 with gender dysphoria? To the best of my understanding of my situation and having read about so many people who had similar experience to mine, that it's very common for people to live with the gender conflict I did since I was in middle school, for it to finally erupt when they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And I was in my mid-50s. And not being able to point to anything else, and having noticed it just worsened and worsened and worsened over the years. I never took it as a midlife crisis. I took it as my having a condition that finally progressed enough that it got to where it overtook me. And it sure did overtake me. So then everything that followed, my transitioning and so forth, was a product of that. One of the aspects, though, of why does it overtake people when they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s? People do go through midlife crises. I've known a couple of people that the best way to understand it was, wow, they went through a midlife crisis. You know, they leave their spouse. I knew a guy who bought this crazily expensive red teeny weeny sports car that's so small you can almost put it in your pocket. But we examined that. Is it possible that folks like me with this gender conflict, even though we don't think about it consciously, there's something going on inside us where we recognize our life is growing way shorter. And this gender conflict we always had, is there some sense in us that we need to be able to express it? I don't have an answer to that. My best answer is that it was my hormones, and because of everything I experienced in the shifting of my hormones and how it affected how I experienced myself as male or female, that's been my best answer. Here's what bothers me, though, is that other people would say Greg went through a midlife crisis because it feels way too superficial. And it was the furthest from superficial. It was to the depth of my being. And it wasn't something that I began experiencing in midlife, for goodness sakes. I started experiencing it. Well, my first experience was before 6th grade, but it took root in 6th grade and just kept digging its roots deeper and deeper through my entire life. So it's not like I just decided when I was 55 that I want to buy a red sports car, or I want to leave my wife, or I want to... In fact, one of the things that bothered me so much about being transgender is how people looked at me and forgot the person I was. I lamented to a friend earlier this year It's like they forgot. I was this reliable and a committed Christian, and just every good quality about myself that I've taken so seriously and cultivated my entire life. And thankfully, my friend replied, "Yeah, that's how I see you." But of course, that friend was loyal throughout. But how many people just looked at me and said, "Nah, midlife crisis," or the previous video, "Oh, look at what Julie had to put up with him." Now, 5.5 years into feeling like a guy, 5 years into living outwardly where everybody else knows me as Greg again. Yeah, they accept me, but just so much stuff is left unsaid. How do they look at me? Thankfully, I don't think about it much. I knew what was going on out there. Man, when I was a pastor, I knew people talk about their pastor. They talk about stupid stuff they do or don't agree with what they preach in sermons or how they handle a funeral or whatever. I had plenty of that stuff. But you just can't think about it or else you'd go nuts. And so when I announced I was transgender, holy cats. In me, I was as straight as an arrow as can be, conservative in everything about my life. So I knew all that stuff. There's times though when I need to talk about it and I need to put it on a platform where people can see it. Midlife crisis. Everything Julie put up with me. 2 completely unfair things. Not just to me, but to so many people. And so many people are just being screwed over. I would use more strong language if I were prone to do that. 2023, all the CRAP that's going on in our nation regarding transgender people. I am just absolutely at my wit's end and feel like I'm doing less than that much about it. So one more video. No, it wasn't a midlife crisis I went through. It was a crisis of my existence as a human being is what I went through. And praise the Lord, I'm healed and healthy and that I can speak out and perhaps help a little bit. 8 minutes, that's more than enough of my stuff.